Hello and welcome to UC Today. My name is Christopher Carey and today I'm joined by Adam Freeman, Senior Unified Communications Specialist at Global Relay. Today's session will focus on how we can avoid compliance issues holding us back when rolling out new technology. Adam, it's great to have you with us. Given your expertise in this area, is compliance really stopping people from deploying collaboration tools?
Hi, Christopher. Yeah, thanks for having me. I think compliance are naturally risk averse. So, there's always a temptation to kind of, block channels or block different communication types. And that probably seems a bit more appealing than exploring, kind of new collaboration tools and kind of new technology and then obviously exploring how to monitor them. So I think that's often the kind of, I suppose, first option that the compliance teams seem to go down is prohibition. But I think we've seen from countless fines that just blocking these channels is not feasible long term. They generally kind of encourage people to kind of use those off channel messaging solutions or collaboration tools, whatever they're choosing to use. And so, kind of really long term, it's better to, invest in solutions and avoid fines in the long run. I think kind of also, concerns over security, that's always a very big issue, not been helped with some of the kind of recent events that have happened around, again, security specifically around, messaging applications and, the negative press that kind of goes with that probably reinforces that kind of notion of kind of prohibition. But I think, there's so many different collaboration tools now on the market, that you can't just continue to block them. People are going to use them if they're there, to make their job and their life easier. So, really, long term, it's it pays to invest in and start investigating the tools that are available as opposed to kind of blocking them as an easy option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what are some of the most common pitfalls you see when companies try to deploy these collaboration platforms without a clear strategy?
Yeah, so often sort of teams being siloed is a big issue. It's not easy to roll out technology across different teams. If there isn't that kind of collaboration between teams, and that's kind of often the case, and then that often leads to kind of patchy data because you've perhaps got you're capturing some data from some teams on some channels and not from others. And in a world where data completeness is absolutely paramount to effective compliance strategies, overcoming these silos for kind of data consistency is critical. I think also not allowing specific teams to sort of dictate the solution. So often, particularly with, say, kind of messaging applications like WhatsApp or Signal or some of these other applications, the front office are predominantly the kind of main users of those applications. And so they often will perhaps be kind of driving the strategy. A lot of those applications are being used for sort of personal communication, and therefore, it's easy for them to be adopted, in the sort of business environment because people are used to using them. But there's often, again, pitfalls around security, scalability, control, administration. So I think ensuring that all departments are involved in the in your kind of compliance strategy, your conversations around technology. So whether that's front office, IT, compliance, legal, procurement, there will be some solutions that will perhaps suit some departments more than others. And so, really you need to make sure that all of those teams and departments are involved. Obviously that means often a longer process, perhaps for deployment. And so there's there's the tendency, perhaps, if they need to roll something out quickly, to just involve kind of the critical teams. Hence, say often it might be the front office that are kind of heavily involved. But you need to make sure that you're rolling out a solution for the long term, and to do that, you'd need to tick all the boxes, not just obviously the kind of usability factor. It needs to be, say, secure. It needs to be compliant. It needs to be scalable if you're rolling it out, across multiple teams, jurisdictions, countries, etc. And it needs to have an element of control. We've got all these other tools, whether it's kind of email, CRM, all these other applications that we use in our organisations, and they all have certain controls in place. Then you need to ensure that those same sort of controls are in place for collaboration platforms, messaging applications. They're no different, and so ensuring all those teams are involved in the process is critical.
So, from your perspective, what are the essential best practices organizations should allow to ensure a compliant rollout?
So I suppose probably the first two most important ones are security. So making sure that the tools that you're going to be using have got the relevant kind of security protocols in place, and again that follows your other kind of security policies with regards to the other applications that you're using within the business, and making sure that you're that you're speaking to vendors that are experienced in this area, so that they've got a proven track record of delivering collaboration solutions at scale, securely, and ensuring that it's an organization that's stable and has been doing it for a long time. So they would be the first two things that I would say are essential before you kind of kickstart that rollout process. Touch on a little bit what we spoke about in the last question. So ensuring that all the departments and teams involved in the process, both from a vendor selection but also a product sort of rollout, they all need to be involved. They've all got an important role to play to ensure a smooth rollout. It's not just about selecting the right product or the right vendor. You then want to make sure that that the rollout follows that process and is smooth. And obviously, to do that, you need to ensure that, again, it might be IT, compliance, surveillance teams, procurement, again, that they are they've all been kind of heavily involved in that process. I'd always involve, certainly for kind of front end applications, so again, going back to some of those messaging platforms, a proof of concept is always important, because you want to make sure that from the kind of capture perspective, that your compliance and surveillance teams are happy that you're capturing all of the data that you need. From the end user perspective, they're happy with the application that they're using. So it's really straightforward now to kind of get a POC up and running, really within a matter of days. So testing the solution properly before you proceed. Generally, companies are probably going to be going into this for a minimum of a year's contract, if not longer. So you don't want to be putting in a solution that's not been properly tested. And then the last thing I would say is depending on where the organisation is based, if they've got multiple kind of regions, time zones, kind of ensure that you've got the right customer service support, whether that's provisioning, technical support across those different time zones, because often if you've only got kind of support from your vendor perhaps in one region and you're rolling out users in another region, that's just going to slow down the whole kind of process, and just mean that rollout is going to be a lot slower. So making sure that you've got kind of multi-region support across those different departments, is really, really important.
And how does Global Relay support organizations managing compliance from day one of a tool's implementation, rather than, say, retrofitting controls after the fact?
Yeah, so I think, again, that's where the POC process comes in. So making sure that when you're going through that proof of concept, that you've sat down and we've sat down with an organisation's compliance, surveillance teams, IT teams, front office teams to make sure that everything is kind of configured as to how they want it. From day one, things are always going to change and evolve over time, whether it's kind of policy refinement, or different data types that they're going to be capturing for different users. So, there's always going to be an element of kind of configuration after you've rolled out the solution, but you want to make sure that from kind of day one, everything is kind of set up, as best as it can be according to the, to the customer's requirements. So, again, that's making sure that you've got the relevant teams involved, both from a global relay perspective. We've got our kind of compliance team and compliance professionals here that will help a customer, perhaps with the way that they're configuring their policies, all the way down to just, from an end user application setup. So it might be things like SSO, multi-factor authentication, linking with your kind of directory, just to kind of, again, ensure kind of a smooth rollout. Regular drop-in sessions, I think is very important. So, generally, depending on the size of the rollout and the period of time that we're kind of rolling the solution out, we'll have regular drop-in sessions with a customer, whether that's daily, bi-weekly, just to ensure, again, that we're kind of following the process, that everything is being kind of set up, configured, and is being tested by the customer, all the way along the process. You don't want everything to be set up and then them kind of go into testing phase on that day one. So, because they can kind of do a phased rollout often with the various connectors, they can bring certain connectors on, initially. So they might start with email and then maybe roll out voice communication, maybe messaging. They can easily kind of roll out and test, as they go along, so that when we move a customer into steady state, everything has been, kind of rigorously tested, as opposed to, the customer organisation, kind of rushing around to try and, test everything as soon as it's gone live. So, again, it ensures that it's not like a big bang handover from our, kind of provisioning teams. It's, it's all kind of been tested, and we're handing over that kind of customer to our, our sort of steady state teams, confident that everything is, up and running and working as expected.
And what role should compliance teams play in the early stages of evaluating and adopting new communication platforms?
Yeah, so I think, again, making sure that they're involved early in the process is paramount, because ultimately, the reason that they're looking to deploy these solutions is for compliance. So, the compliance team is probably the most important, if not, it is the most important, kind of team in this process, because ultimately it's something that they have to do to meet, regulation. So they need to be involved from the start. They need to make sure that they are helping to kind of dictate the outcomes that they're looking for, from the solution. And so, whether that's e-coms, whether that's voice, or a combination, ultimately the end result is providing, a clean set, of unified data for compliance teams to be able to, kind of review and perform surveillance on. So if they can outline their clear kind of requirements at the start of the process, then again, you can make sure that you're recommending, the right tools and solutions, to kind of to meet their goals, rather than, again, you kind of touched on the last question, kind of trying to retrofit after the event. If IT have gone and sort of procured something because perhaps it's seen as a technology requirement, but actually the end goal is, yes, it's kind of a technology requirement to capture perhaps mobile communication, but then the end goal is making sure that it's, is available for the compliance team. If you're trying to retrofit it, it's only going to lead probably to a disgruntled compliance team not being able to, do their jobs properly, or taking them a lot longer to do their reviews. So, they're pivotal in being involved in the process from the start.
And what advice would you give to leaders who are eager to innovate but feel stuck because of regulatory or governance concerns?
So I think, kind of in short, compliance and regulation should never hold you back when looking to innovate. There are a whole manner of different solutions now on the market. So, um, there are a lot of options out there, and perhaps sometimes that's maybe a little bit scary, because obviously there's a lot for leaders and their kind of compliance and surveillance teams to kind of review, and making sure that they're obviously meeting their kind of regulatory and governance requirements. So you need to make sure that you've got a kind of robust, well-structured procurement process, which is again very much aligned with your compliance strategy, so that you can ensure that all stakeholders play their part in that process, from the leadership down to again the kind of front office, front end users of the application. But yeah, more often than not, the technology exists to solve your problem. And perhaps if we're using messaging applications as an example, because they're quite topical, maybe 5-6 years ago, that technology didn't exist. And so again, prohibition and banning those channels was the best policy, but things have moved on a lot. Technology, is moving on a real pace now. Obviously, with the adoption of kind of AI and AI surveillance now, it's only going to kind of push that further. So, the technology is there. It's widely available, to kind of go and explore, test, do proof of concepts like we've touched on. You need to obviously be a bit of open to change. You need to be able to allocate the required resource to kind of properly, test a solution. So, again, having that kind of robust, well-structured procurement process is important. You've got to get all those different teams involved in the process, and obviously there's a cost element for the company, allocating resources internally to these sort of projects. But if you do it properly, then you will end up with a much better solution, and one that you'll be able to obviously adopt and deploy long term. If you try to sort of cut corners and not allocate enough resource to a project, then it's only going to only going to mean that you'll either roll out the wrong solution, or one that's only really fit for the short term, might not be scalable, longer term as the company grows. It might not fit all of your kind of, again, growth requirements long term. So yeah, investing, kind of time, money, resources in the process early on, is going to save you a lot of time and money in the long term. You're not going to be having to replace, and remove applications, or vendors that perhaps don't now meet your needs for the longer term. So, it does pay to kind of invest early and spend that time on it to ensure that you don't have to do it 2 or 3 times, over a 5-year period. You can deploy something and know that that's going to be, pretty much future-proof for the next, 5 years plus.
I think that's all we have time for today, but it's been a really good session, and Adam, I'd like to thank you for joining us. If people want to get in touch and find out more about this, how can they get in touch with Global Relay?
Yeah, sure. So probably best place to start is the website. So globalrelay.com. Lots of information there on the different products, solutions that we provide, and then different ways for people to obviously get in touch with us depending on their requirements. So yeah, globalrelay.com, or our LinkedIn page. There's a lot of content that we put on LinkedIn around the kind of different regulations and kind of products and services on the market, and perhaps how that's affecting the different regulations in the different jurisdictions. So yeah, globalrelay.com or our LinkedIn page.
Great. So if you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and a share on social media, and we'll see you next time. I've been Christopher Carey for UC Today. Thanks for watching.